Barbados. All right, for those making their way inside, if you can just kindly come inside and take your seat, we are about to begin. I would like to officially acknowledge Honorable Dale Marshall, Attorney General of Barbados, who is on his way. Honorable Anil Nanlao, Attorney General Guyana. The Honorable Don J. Smith, Attorney General, British Virgin Islands. The Honorable Cherie Jemmett Rodney, Attorney General, Montserrat. The Honorable Garth Wilkin, Attorney General, St. Kitts. The Honorable Vindhya Prasad, Minister of Human Resources and Social Security of Guyana. Senior officials of the Government of Barbados, members of the judiciary, commissioners of police, deputy commissioners of police, representatives of Bureau of Gender Affairs, high-level officials from CDB, IDB, and other development partners, members of the media, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to day 2. I trust you all had a wonderful evening on our beautiful East Coast, and I know that the Attorney General would have made sure that you had a fantastic time. So I hope all of that rolls into the energy for today. Just a bit of housekeeping. By now, you should know that the restrooms are to the right. All of our breaks and our refreshments will be taken just outside this room that's set up for us at the designated times. The equipment on the table is for anyone who requires simultaneous interpretation in French and Dutch. Once again, you plug in the device first, the headphone, then you switch it on, and then you can choose your channels accordingly. So you will find Dutch on channel 1, English on channel 2, and French on channel 3. There are also interpreting services available with our interpreters in the booths at the back of the room, so feel free to utilize those services as well. So, as we are about to begin day 2 of the Regional Symposium to advance state responses on domestic violence, this morning we are going to begin with a powerful testimony shared by Ms. Tot Lampkin. She is the mother of a domestic violence victim in the landmark Tot Lampkin versus Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago case. Her story serves as a poignant reminder of the real human cost of institutional gaps and the urgent need for stronger, more coordinated responses to domestic violence. She will be joining us, and I ask you to turn your attention to the screen. Please welcome Ms. Lampkin. We are honored to have you here today.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Tot Lampkin. I was a victim of domestic violence for 36 years. But now I'm free from domestic violence for 8 years now. It wasn't an easy journey. is the worst thing that could happen to someone. I myself and my daughter, Samantha Isaac, she fell a victim to domestic violence too. And with me, there was no way out. I had no family, I had no friends. I have known no one because I was brought here to this country on a lie. I was brought here to see Carnival, which would have been the best carnival in the world. And then I was held against my will. I will say it was human trafficking because I was 16 years old. I was locked away in a house in Laventille, and my passport was taken away from me. Actually, I haven't got my passport until about 20 years after. My passport was taken away from me, and I was held in that house in Laventille against my will, a young girl. Then I was taken to a different part of Trinidad, which was Carenage. I lived there. I had no friends. I have no family around the victim family I was living. So I have no friends. I have no family. I have no one to turn to. And I was a victim of domestic violence for years. I was beaten. The most inhumane thing was that he could do a human was taken, what happened to me. I will get my hair cut with a cutlass off my head. I'll be beaten to the bone. And I wasn't doing nothing because I have no friend, I have no family. I just wanted to go home. But there was no way out. When I do get an help, because to be truthful, I had no clothes. My clothes would have been burned so that I wouldn't leave the house. So when I will get in contact with a neighbor who will help me and lend me something some sort of clothes to wear, which was usually too big for me, I'll pin it up and I'll go to the police station, get away and go to the police station. I didn't get any help. No help. For years, no help. They will tell me, you have children? Well, go home and meet your children. Things will cool down. Don't worry that. Don't care how I go there with my skin blue or black or whatever. Nobody helped me. I never knew I could get help in any way. And this is a strange country. I did not belong here, so I know nowhere. I don't know you could go to court, you could get a safe place to go or not. I know nothing. My children, I have 9 children. I love my children with all my heart. They are my family because I was torn away from my family. I don't have no connection with my family anymore. So they was my family. I loved them with all my heart. I didn't make them to say, well, I plan and I make one. They say that it wasn't so. There was force on me. I accept them and I love them with all my heart. So there was all I have. We stick together to thick and thin. All my children grew up in a very abusive home. They will watch me being beaten with a cutlass. They'll watch me being knocked down with a tank full of gas, and they're small, they couldn't help me. It's only when the children get a little, because I make 6 sons. And the 5 of the sons was before, 5 sons on the street. And when they get a little bigger now that they could assist me, they will come to my assistance seeing I'm being beaten all the time. Most of the time, why I'm being beaten, their father will go to work for the whole week. And when it's Friday, he will leave us Friday hungry because he have nothing in the house to eat. And he will say, I'll come home early and I'll get something to eat. I will see him Saturday morning about 6 o'clock. And when he comes, he doesn't bring a cent. He sleep where you want to sleep or running hose or whatever, and nothing for us. And I don't have to say anything. I just have to look sad I'm going to get beat. We are hungry. We wake up hungry and I'm getting beat. Cutlass at my neck. I have a finger had almost severed with a bread knife trying to cut my throat. And just because I'm sad, he said me, you don't believe me. You don't believe I get robbed. You don't believe I was in jail. And nothing like that of this sort happened. Eh? You can't be locked up every Friday. So if I'm sitting down and I'm sad and I don't say anything, I am going to have it. If I say anything, make it worse. So every Saturday morning, people hear me screaming and begging for help. Nobody come to my rescue. I never see nothing like that. Nobody helps me in the village. I goes to the health center, pregnant, And I'm telling the nurses what I'm going through. Nobody helps me. I goes to the station, nobody helps me. I never have help. So when my daughter Samantha found herself in love with this young man who met her in the University of the West Indies, they had a Christmas session, and he met her there. And probably she fell in love with him, whatever, and he will follow her all the time, curse all the time, seem to be hitting her all the time. I did not the first stage, but I'm always seeing him putting on makeup and things like that. Hitting her all the time. And when I get to find out that, I say, I don't want nobody hitting my daughter. So I tell him, Samantha, I say, Sammy, you want to go to what you see your father put me through? She said, Mommy, no, I can't go to that at all because it's not easy living in this life and I don't want nobody to treat me this way. She ended up getting pregnant and take a leave from UE for 2 years. So she make the baby. She was on her own doing these things. She built a little room downstairs by me, and she was on her own. And he will target her, terrorize her, will not leave her alone. That man will call 200-300 times a day. And when he comes, she have to summon her phone to him that he could go through it and see everything. And he's coughing her face and beat. I say, you don't have to live this way. So I said, don't come back by my place. And she trying now to say, well, all right, she's maintaining her child alone. I'm taking care of the child. She is maintaining the child financially. And she said, well, Mommy, you know what? My 2 years is almost up. She's going to real domestic abuse from me. On the road, he will hold her hair. She had long hair and he'll pull her down on the street. She had to cut her hair to get away from him and things like that. He'll pull her into his car, drive her close to her. Is abuse all the time. She had taken him to court for a restraining order against him and full custody of the child and things like that because he was a young man who's they always shooting up at him and things. So he was on the violent side. So she said she didn't want her child around him. But he used to still come and pick up the child and go and come, and they was in court. She got no justice in the court. Imagine the magistrate threw out the case and didn't tell her nothing. She went to court, he threw out the case because the young man come and say, oh, we making back and we forgetting about that. And so we decided, she haven't heard anything from Samantha. She threw out the case. So my daughter now gets no help from the courts. The police station, we got no help. I never got help. She never got any help. I'm always there with her when we go and make our report. I have every receipt from the report we make until now in my possession. We never got help. This young man came into our house, break into a window, and came into the house, jumped over a wall, and his gun fell on the floor. He take up that gun. Samantha run out of the back door, leave the child there, run upstairs by me. And I lock her in, I call the police. The police is telling me they have no vehicle now to come and whatever. When I look, it was the most rainy day of the year. To me, it was. And that young man will take up the baby, which is Kaden, out of his sleep in the rain and bring him out just to get our attention to open the door. When I saw the child sleeping in the rain on his shoulder, I have to open the door. When I opened the door, I had a knife that make with 4 fingers could go in the handle, put by my neck, and a gun pull out by my head. I have to just slide it, and I just take the child from him in a couch position. He put the knife on because I couldn't stand the child in the rain. And then my next daughter grabbed the child and run, and he's wrestling with me because he always want to kill me because I'm protecting my daughter. And so their father was in the bedroom at the time. He come and he wrestled him out and he went. When we called back the police and we told the police all what happened, they say, he gone. As we say, yes, he ran out the yard and gone. They told us, well, come in tomorrow very early and make a report. We went, I myself and my daughter went to make the report. No police show up. I called about 4 or 5 times. What going on? Why you all don't do nothing to it? They said, don't worry, ma'am, you could deal with that. They never dealt with that. How much checks of him going to kill her? They never dealt with nothing. until my daughter was murdered. Down to the day, the Friday before she was murdered, he attacked her and she called the police, and the police took them and said they would fail to arrest him. But when he finished giving his smooth talk, they let him off. That is the Friday morning. He killed my daughter this Saturday morning when she's coming from a birthday party with her friends from school. He broke her 2 foot. He shot her in her 2 legs, the left and the right. He beat her, he and his accomplice, mercilessly. They dragged her into his car, and he was going to the next side of the country, which is Macquarie, with her. So if he had thrown her over some cliff, I wouldn't have found her. Somehow she happened to escape the car, fall on the ground in the middle of the road, and he decided to come out of the car, take his hand and pull her dress almost up to her shoulder, exposing her body out on the road, stand on his back, his footprint was on her white dress, and give her the last bullet from the back of her head. When I also went to the infirmary to see my daughter, I thought she had 2 bullets. But no, her forehead had mashed up with gun butt. And then she had the big hole in the top of her head. Then he proceeded to went home and murder himself. But my daughter didn't die because she was a fighter. She was taken to the hospital and they was trying to save her life. She spent about 2-3 hours before she died. So he died before her. At that end, I decided I want justice for my daughter, and I'm going to fight for justice. When I was home about 9 o'clock in the morning, some police officers show up in my yard. And I had told my daughter, my next daughter that was there with me, I said, Samantha is dead. She said, Mommy, how you could say that? I said, she's not home. And I don't believe she's asleep by no friends, none of our schoolmates. I said, I went down to touch her purse and like needle run through my body. And Samantha is dead. She said, Mommy, don't say those things. You have goat mouth. I said, no, I know my daughter is dead. When I was leaving her downstairs to come back in her upstairs, the son keep crying out, call his mother 3 times. And I told him, I said, kid, stop calling Mommy. Mommy will come later. He said, no, Granny, Mommy never coming back. And he started crying. That's the hour my daughter passed away in the infirmary. So I was upstairs very down because I know my daughter is dead. I have the feelings part of me have died. In which the police came to the house, and their father, which is my abusive husband, he came. We are not married, but we are common law. He came into the room and he heard everything. But he have already know his daughter died because his cousin had called him and tell him, but he didn't tell us anything. And I was blocking in and out of consciousness due to the news I'm getting from the police. But my common husband was knocking me down all the time, coughing in my face and knocking me out all the time. So when I'm getting consciousness, I'm hearing the police telling him, if you touch her one more time, we will kill you. And I told the officers, I say, you know what? Today's the last I'm going to stay in this house. I walk away and went by my daughter's apartment and left with only the suit of clothes on my back. I left everything behind. And I say, I'm going to start a new life. I'm going to turn my life over to Jesus, take care of Kate. I have nothing. I didn't have $1. But I decided to walk away before I'm dead too, because I see my daughter is dead and I know I could have been dead many times. I have been pushed down with my belly, 8 months pregnant, hit on a stone, a big stone, and bleeding by him with abuse. I nearly died many times. So I say it's not possible. I see my daughter gone now. I could go to. I am going to step out. I don't care what it takes. I'm going to step out of this relationship. And from the day I step out, I never return to that relationship. But I make my daughter one promise. I had to bury my daughter on my way. And he told me, the father told me, in front of the officers who was in the house, you will bury she alone, or the government will bury she, because I ain't putting a cent and you can't touch a cent from my account to bury she. I say God will provide. I accept Christ, I changed my life, I turned it around, and I told my daughter on the day of the burial, I kiss her on her cheeks and I said, Samantha, I will fight for justice for you until my life is end. I said, I don't care if I don't get justice, but at least I'm going to fight. I'm going to make sure I fight for justice because I wasn't dealt well and you wasn't dealt well. I spent all my life crying. I was being abused by two people at the same time. When I'm speaking to my son-in-law and telling him, you can't be cheating my daughter so. Why are you abusing her like that? She say, Mom, I met her virgin and nobody's getting her. I rather kill her than anybody get her. And you know, my common husband had told me the very same thing years ago. So I told him I don't want to see you at all around me and around my home. When he seemed to be abusing my daughter and I will step in and say something, he said, well, look at you. You're getting kicked and knocked down and beat like a dog from your husband and you telling me what to do. All of us in the same ship. And you know the funny thing about that? It seemed like my common husband was satisfied with the treatment our daughter is getting because he was putting it out to me too. And he was good so with this abuser. They was always good. They were always smoking and drinking and having a good time. So when we are fighting to survive and to get away, he was the friend of that same victim. Yeah, he was a friend of him. And this man had no control. He had no control in his life. He cursed, he smoked, he drank, and he is abusive. And he's always ready to fight. But I didn't know he would have killed my daughter like that because he had promised really to kill me first. My grandson went by him and he told my grandson, he was a baby, going to 3 at the time, and he told my grandson, tell Granny I say, I have a big gift to give her for Christmas. I said, I want nothing from him. I didn't know it was my daughter he is planning to kill. So he killed my daughter the 17th of December. That's where my life turned upside down, and it will never be the same. I won my case. I'm proud and thankful for that. But I will trade it to get back my daughter. But I know I will never get her back. Samantha was a loving person. Out of all my children, she was the most loving. Samantha will never greet you without hugging. All of my children will call me mom. Sammy will call me mother. She's always a loving child. To everybody in the village, anywhere she go, she was doing good. She was a wonderful person. And that's why my mind was telling me, probably she was not to stay with us. I said she probably was an angel and she was just spending some time with us. She was totally a nice person. Nobody have a fault with Samantha. The only person was that boyfriend who wanted her to stay in the house, don't come out, don't talk to nobody, don't pursue her career. And the funny thing is that she was about to go back out to continue her studies in UE. In 2 weeks from the time she got murdered, she was to go back out and do her own. So he's claimed that he will kill her because she won't want her. She won't want him if she pursues her education. So she's going to turn out all right. I am so glad still that he didn't, because I understand he was 5 houses away from where I'm living with an accomplice and 2 guns. And he was saying, if Samantha doesn't come home that night, if she doesn't come home from the party, whatever, if she sleep by one of her girlfriends, she went to St. Francis Girls College, so everybody was girl. If she sleep by one of her girlfriends, he will come up on the hill and kill me and the child and kill everybody in the house until Samantha reaches. So in a sense, Samantha saved my life, because if she didn't come home, he might have killed us. It could have been different. So when I look back on it, I thank God for his mercy and grace. And I thank God for the little son that he left behind. She left behind for me. He was 3 at the time. Now he's 11 years old, a beautiful young man, outstanding citizen. And I bring him up in the fear of God. He does well in school. Since he started school, he's a A student all the time. I'm getting good words from him, from every teacher, every principal. Everybody wants him, but I'm not giving him my baby. That's all I have left of Samantha. From the trip with bringing him out in the rainy night, he suffers from asthma. That's the only problem I have, and I'm dealing with it, I'm bearing with it, and I'm taking very good care of my baby. What I would like to see is justice for our ladies. We are not getting justice. We are not. We have been at the bottom of the ladder. We could be chopped up, throw away, killed, and whatever, and they sweep it under the carpet. They don't care. We are the mother of the nation. Everybody have to have a mother. And there must be some legislation out to protect our ladies. And what I've noticed they are doing now in Trinidad, if they can't murder you, they are getting somebody to murder you. So in any case, it's not we don't have a safe ship at all. We are victim of circumstances, and something must be put in place to protect us. Other than that, we will keep dying all the time, keep murdering, and no justice come out of it. I don't know if they put things in place now to help people. We didn't have. If I had, I would have been in some protective custody and show Samantha too. I remember Samantha kneeling on the wet road and begging God to take her. She said, Mommy, I can't make it. I can't take it anymore. I don't know what to do. We had no choice. I didn't know what to do. We didn't know what to do. You understand? She was tired. I was tired too, but I never give up, and I'm never going to give up. I'm never going to give up. I'm always going to push and push. And I want them to do something better about our ladies, do something better about our children. Due to that circumstances, my two other daughters, does not want any husband. They are single. They are Christian. They are single. They're taking care of themselves because they don't intend to go through what my daughter went through. And these things is going on still. You're still going in session and nobody helps. It's still going on. It is still going on. So they need to put something better in place to deal with these criminals. If they can't abide with the law and they can't do what's properly and they can't leave your children alone, and it seems to be they're mad, lock them up into an institution. You understand? And don't wait until they kill somebody to put them in jail and still have to mind them. And we lost our children. That's not fair. And this is going on all over the world and not only in the Caribbean. But we need to be protected. Our daughters need to be protected. I'm 61 years of old. So I could go anytime, but I would like to see something put in place because I have two daughters leave behind, and everybody, beautiful children, they won't go to waste. You understand? They will have justice.
Colleagues, we may have lost connection to the site in Trinidad and Tobago, where Ms. Lampkin is speaking to us from. Ms. Lampkin, can you hear us now?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for returning. Please continue. Go right ahead.
Yeah. I just want to see justice for all the ladies, mothers of our nation. They should put something in place. The government should put something in place. And the police not neglecting people and sending them back. Because when I've been beaten, right, and I go to the station, and the police send me back home. Here what my children's father will tell me, you see, they don't have time to waste with you. And he will start on me again, so it's no use going in the station because I'm not getting help. They're never coming. They never have vehicle, and they're not climbing that hill, and they're there and just so I'm going to get a beat again. But I never give up. I always go to the station. I never give up, I'm always going to the station. So I have so much receipt home that I kept still in my position in going to the station, although nothing comes out of it, although I do not get justice. I'm very thankful for my lawyers, Mr. Clay Hackett, Mr. Douglas Mendez, and his beautiful wife, Roberta Clark, who have encouraged me. She was, I will say, my only friend. Always push me, always by my side. And she will tell me, Miss Lampkin, we'll do it, and whether we get justice or not, although we know we do it, I say, okay, we got it. Whether I get justice or not, I know I tried. She's a wonderful lady. I thank everybody who helped me and stay by my side, although I didn't have much. I'm very, very grateful. And I want us to continue this fight and fight for our ladies, fight for our daughters, to make sure that they will stop dying. They're dying. Since Samantha passed, it's countless of them pass off. And every time somebody pass, my heart break. I just get into a kind of way that I can't function. Like it's a form of depression because it brings back all the memories of Samantha, and I know somebody else is going through this and that. I'm not rich. I had nothing. When I start my case, I had nothing. But I know I have wonderful lawyer who listened to me and was there for me. So I decide, not because I'm poor, I have nothing. I'm going to fight for justice. Somebody have to make a difference. And I did. I did fight for justice. And I thank God for everything. I won't be able to get back my daughter. I will think of her every day. I cremate my daughter and I never get rid of her ash. She will live with me until I see time due to get rid of her. I'm not getting rid of her. No, not for no one. Mm-mm. I love my daughter. I'm holding on to her. And I'm going to take the best care of her son until my eyes is closed. And I know God will grant me the years to see him grow into a wonderful citizen, an outstanding person, a leader, not a follower, a head and not a tail, and a lender, not a borrower. I declare that over my little grandson. And for all of our troubled ladies who's in trouble with domestic violence, with abusive husband, I am begging you all, if you know you could get help, get out. Run for your life. I run without $1 in my hand. I walked away with nothing. Don't know I'm getting breakfast the next morning, but I walked out and I'm alive. This is my appearance now. When my daughter died, I was looking like I'm in the 70s. How I was abused and bad treated. I didn't have a smile. My mother made me with a beautiful smile. I had one of the beautifulest smile. But when I was in my abusive relationship, it's only a frown on my face. I haven't smiled for years. I couldn't smile. I had nothing to smile for. I have nothing to smile for. It's only tears was in my life. Tears and unhappiness. And the only thing that kept me going was my children. They was my all. I love them with all my heart. And I will fight for them for the rest of my life. They was my only family. Since I have my matter in court, when I was going through my court matter, I got to find out I have 1 or 2 families around the country. I never knew no family. I was all alone. But the greatest thing, I have God by my side. So I had a gold mine. Although I was rich, I had a gold mine. And I have somebody on my side until I meet Miss Roberta Clark. She changed my life. Her husband and Mr. Clay Hackett. They changed my life.
Ms. Lampkin.
I'm not where I want to be, but I'm going there. So I thank God for everything. And I thank everybody for listening to me. And you all have a wonderful day. Yeah, Samantha. And this, I would like to show you a photo of my daughter. I don't know if you can see it properly. This is Samantha Isaacs.
Ms. Lampkin, on behalf of everyone in this room, we want to sincerely express first our deep regret and heartfelt and sincere condolences for your loss and the loss of your beautiful daughter. And we want to thank you for sharing your story with us. You are clearly a wonderful mother. You are clearly a strong woman who has fought through so much adversity. And we take this opportunity now to say thank you for continuing that fight, because it's a story that I think will resonate just not there in Trinidad and Tobago, but across the Caribbean, perhaps globally.
Yeah.
So thank you.
You're welcome. So welcome.
Ms. Lampkin, we're going to now invite one of your heroes and one of our colleagues to join us for our panel. You are more than welcome to sit and listen and participate as you wish. If there's anything you want to say, you are more than welcome to interrupt, please. But thank you again. And colleagues, what I will do now is I'll invite the panel to come up. Mr. Mendez, Ms. Ali, and join me on the head table. While we're doing that, if anyone needs to take a moment, feel more than free, okay? So, of course, we're very keen to continue in this spirit of what this entire symposium is about, is reducing the chances of having those stories shared and continuing throughout the Caribbean. And the hope is that from the Tot Lampkin example, we'll be able to drive the necessary reforms, whether it's systemic, whether it's legislative, whether it's operational, whether it's interpersonal. And I'm very happy to be joined on this panel by, of course, Douglas Mendez, the senior counsel who was a part of the claimant's case and team and who argued successfully before Justice Mohammed. And we're also very, very happy to have with us Ms. Amani Ali from the Department of Civil Law, a legal counsel who was very much also a part of supporting the state's efforts, right, in response to the claimant. Of course, we acknowledge the Honorable Attorney General. So appreciative that this is the right time to have you here, sir. So, we're going to go right into it. And forgive me if this gets a little policy wonky, but I think it's important for us to set out the precepts, some of the main concepts, so we can then enlist a wider discussion with all of you. And I want to begin first with you, Douglas. I know in terms of setting up the legal strategy for this discussion, you really seemed, with your colleagues, to focus on constitutionality. And that was very interesting because there were clear defects all across the space. You could have chosen other types of legal remedies, judicial review. You could have looked at things like what might have been there as an appeals process from the Domestic Violence Act. Why did you guys decide it was important to make this a constitutional story?
Well, the answer to that is fairly easy. It was the only remedy available. Long after the events, the judicial review may have been available to challenge the police inactivity in not responding to the various complaints that were made to them. Samantha could have appealed when the magistrate dismissed her application before the court for relief, but she didn't. So by the time the case came to us, all of those remedies were, of course, useless. And all that was left was the remedies under the Constitution. But I think the larger question is, what were the remedies available to Samantha while she was going through this ordeal? And indeed, what were the remedies available to Ms. Lampkin while she was going through her own 20-year ordeal, as she has just described to us? And the remedies are there. You go to the police. Somebody's threatening your life. Somebody is assaulting you. You go to the police for protection. And it's important that Ms. Lampkin used the word protection. She was looking for protection. She went to the police for protection. And of course, that word protection looms large in the Constitution, because you have a right to the protection of the law. And that's where she went to the police for protection. She did not get it. Samantha went to the court for protection, because there's a procedure under the legislation. You go to the court for protection. There's the word again, protection orders. but she didn't get it because the magistrate, for whatever reason, was distrustful of her motivations. She thought that she was only there to get an expedited maintenance hearing. That is why she added on the application for a protection order. So she didn't get what the law provided to her, either by the police or by the magistrate. So even though those remedies were available then, yes, theoretically, Ms. Lampkin in over 20 years could have gone to the court for judicial review to force the police to do their duty. Yes, there was a remedy of appeal against the decision of the magistrate to dismiss the case. But are those really realistic remedies for persons who, as Ms. Lampkin is saying, I had nobody? Where am I going to go to? Who is going to help me? Who is going to take these matters to court? Those are not realistic remedies. We have to ultimately, we could only rely on the Constitution in order to establish constitutional breaches. And that is why the case was all about the Constitution.
Thank you so much, Douglas. I'm also interested because another plank in your structure for your legal arguments was this idea of the positive obligation and being able to make a case to say this is not just about the loss or the deprivation of the right to protection, but that no, there is more active and proactive elements. And we heard the Honorable Attorney General speak about this yesterday, that this is a really important dynamic to come into the Caribbean context. I'm just going to allow you to just share more about, from your perspective, why this is such an important touch point, this idea of positive obligation of the state.
Well, again, as lawyers, we are accustomed to bringing proceedings when somebody did something to you. When there is a violation that is perpetrated by an arm of the state. They did something to you, they took your liberty, they took your life, that is an arm of the state did it. But there's difficulty, and the common law, the legislation has been grappling for many years with fixing liability where the wrong that is done is an omission to do something. You failed to do something, and you are now being held liable for that omission. So in order to, and that's what happened in this instance, the police omitted to do their duties, the magistrate omitted to do her duty, and therefore we had to fix liability under the Constitution for the failure to act. And therefore you have to establish a positive duty on the part of the state. Although this case has been lauded for the fact that it was an enforcement of positive obligations, the existence of positive obligations under our Constitution is not new. When you think of it, if there's an obligation or there's a right to life and not to be deprived of life except by due process of law or in accordance with law, if the only way that you're going to have due process of law, if your life or your liberty is going to be taken away, is if you provide a system of justice, whereby there can be a trial as to whether you have committed any offense and justifying the taking of your liberty. And who is going to establish the system of justice? The state has to do it. So there is implicit in the Constitution obligations on the state to ensure that rights are complied with, that their rights are protected. And it is a matter of finding those positive obligations. The difficulty in this case is that the right to life on which we relied and which featured in a number of other cases worldwide in the European Commission of Human Rights and so on, the right to life in other constitutions is expressed in such a way as to imply a positive obligation on the state to preserve life. The language that is used in our constitutions doesn't lend easily to that sort of interpretation. And there will be arguments about whether Justice Mohammed was right to find a positive obligation under the right to life. But the right to the protection of the law is obviously imposing an obligation on the state to do something to protect you. That you can only get the protection of the law if the state does something to provide that protection. And therefore, we might argue about the right to life and whether there are positive obligations in the various constitutions, but there is no argument anymore about the protection of the law. The CCJ has said that the protection of the law imposes positive obligations. The Privy Council has, in many cases on the protection of the law, imposed positive obligations on the state to do things to ensure the protection of the law. And I should mention, for those countries in the Eastern Caribbean who may have been seeking comfort in the fact that the right to the protection of the law is not enforceable in their constitutions because it's contained within an unenforceable provision, the Privy Council just 2 weeks ago has now declared that that is not so anymore. The right to the protection of the law in all of our constitutions is now enforceable, and therefore these positive obligations are there.
Thank you, Douglas.
Sorry for taking so long.
No, I think excellent response. And I would then open the space to ask Amani, from your perspective, Amani. Douglas just mentioned positive obligations, right? And the importance of that. And we know that no system representing the Caribbean is as yet optimized in its response to domestic violence. But I would be very keen to know, from the point of view of the Office of the Attorney General there in Trinidad and Tobago, in the aftermath of this case, what have been some of the steps taken? What have been some of the improvements or some of the reforms that are either underway, envisioned, or already enacted?
Thank you. Hello? Thank you. So following the decision in May of 2024, in September of last year, there were national consultations to address deficiencies and create a roadmap of a way forward in terms of policy and legislative interventions that can be worked through, and focusing at the center and putting at the center of that the voice of the victims. So I think that was an important consultation that the then AG had. Following that, recently in January of this year in the Senate, there would have also been discussions by Senator Vera, Senior Counsel, and he would have discussed the important role of the Trinidad and Tobago Psychologists Association and how a panel of psychologists who are experts in this field could be put together to specifically address these victims and the impacts of this on them. And then thereafter, a contribution by the then AG, Mr. Armour, Senior Counsel, would have also been made, and this would have addressed the fact that there was a national strategic action plan that was underway between 2023 and into 2027. And this envisioned a holistic approach to the harmonization of certain measures and victim-centered approaches. He recognized the culture of silence that we have in our society today and noted that that is something that we need to address our minds to. Prior to the decision as well, there were changes that were underway, such as we had amendments to our Domestic Violence Act in 2020. We would have also implemented the Gender-Based Violence Unit, and this would have also been merged with the Child Protection Unit and the Sexual Offences Unit. There are also modules that are being taught to police officers when they begin training so that they're more sensitized to domestic violence and more aware of it, so to say. I think there's also still very much scope for works to be done, though, through the use of AI and technology. I believe that we can use the technology to sort data, predict patterns, create maybe a national observatory or regional observatory on gender-based data, violence, and predictors, and I think that would assist us going forward as well.
Excellent points, Amani. Thank you. Excellent points, and I think you mentioned this idea of training and capacity, right? Even as there's technology, there's also the need to have our law enforcement officers and other justice actors more effective in their understanding and competency to deliver justice. Justice Muhammad was very lucid in his criticism of these actors, both the resident magistrate and the law enforcement officers. He called it a gross negligence. And in reading the case, I was curious as to how, in the space of this gross negligence, there wasn't any accountability. It seemed as if there was an investigation that was done by the police service in one instance of one officer, but nothing came of that. And I want to ask both of you this question. If we're going to be serious about addressing domestic violence, does there need to be, beyond the statutory protections for law enforcement, a mechanism that holds individuals accountable for negligence in their pursuit? Is there a public misconduct element that can be made?
Thank you. Usually in these constitutional type matters, the state is usually held accountable for the actions of state actors in ministries or governments or police officers. All these persons, the state is usually found to be responsible for their acts and omissions. So I think without the personal incentive of police officers being personally held liable, it tends to favor inaction, so to say, because persons tend to feel safe under the protection of the Office of the Attorney General, who would protect them at the end of the day. So I think sanctions must coexist, or mandatory duties should be imposed on police officers to report or produce reports based on interviews, based on things that they see, and I think this would provide for more accountability in the process.
Yeah, I endorse that. Even when you take proceedings and you join the errant public officer or police officer in the proceedings, the state tends to pay any damages award that is being made. So police officers might think that there is cover. In this particular case, the police officers who went on affidavit to explain what happened really provided no excuse, except to say, well, I was there when the report was made, but I went off duty and passed it on to X. And then X came and said, yes, it came to me, but I went off duty and passed it on to Y, and so on and so on. But what happened was that the Police Complaints Authority, which is a body in existence in Trinidad to investigate complaints of police misconduct, produced a report, and the report was part of the evidence put before Justice Mohammed, and they recommended to the Commissioner of Police that disciplinary action be taken. So certainly that is one route to hold police officers accountable for their inaction, but sadly in this case, nothing was done. Maybe something can still be done, but certainly that is a route. The persons who deal with these matters certainly can establish internally administrative procedures to ensure that where appropriate disciplinary action is taken against officers. That way they will know that there are consequences for your inaction.
Thank you, colleagues. And I'm going to open it to the colleagues here to ask their questions. I just have one other question, again, for the both of you. And this is in the context of, we are here assembled a regional representation. And the Needham's Point Declaration, for example, speaks to the importance of justice reform on a substantive, fundamental level. But a key element undergirding this entire Tot Lampkin case was resource constraints, right? The police saying, we couldn't get to your home because we didn't have the vehicle. Officers in their affidavits saying, we weren't able to collect the necessary evidence and the records. And there's a question about, of course, fixing things in the domestic space, but what regional lesson can we distill from this about where there are things that we can work on collaboratively that either create synergies, create gains of efficiency if we share them island to island, country to country?
I think small island states face similar challenges in that they are underfunded justice systems, limited shelter capacity, issues of data fragmentation and not sharing data and information that we may have in countries. So I think a novel solution would be perhaps a CARICOM justice fund that could maybe assist and pool resources together, share training and facilities and the like. I think that would assist. And I think also maybe a regional gender observatory which is also collecting this data and can then be fed back into the country, the individual countries, to assist them with what policies should be made specific to the persons and the diaspora, and all of these intricacies should be definitely considered.
Yes, that is certainly necessary and important. The problem I imagine that police officers would point to is that if your police station is undermanned and you have a number of complaints of various criminal action being lodged, and the police is under-resourced and they cannot attend to all of these complaints, then what do you do? That's not the excuse that was given in this case, as I pointed out. None of the police officers said, well, I had too much work to do and therefore I couldn't attend to these particular complaints. They just did not attend to it at all. That's a problem in this case. That might be a problem of sensitization. That might be a problem of lack of prioritization, which can be addressed by the training that was just mentioned, and that is also necessary. But as far as the magistrate is concerned, Trinidad and Tobago has gone to great lengths to provide the necessary judicial resources to deal with matters such as this. So that again, it's there. It's not a question of lack of resources. The resource is there. It's a question again of sensitizing the judicial officers into how you treat with these complaints and trying to understand. Obviously, the magistrate did not understand that Samantha was in danger and did not understand the need to treat with this problem. Maybe it is, I suppose, not trying to find excuses, but I could see judicial officers being punch drunk. You deal with this on a daily basis, and it becomes so normal and natural that it really doesn't strike at you that in other words, everybody is in danger. So what is it? Why is this case different? But that is why you need sensitization, so that you get out of that that rut that you might find yourself in. So that feeds back into the point that was just made, as to the need maybe of sharing resources regionally to provide that necessary training.
Thank you, colleagues. And colleagues, this is where I know we certainly have the Hoover app. You can certainly insert your questions for follow-up, but we really actually have time now, a good 30 minutes for a real rich discussion. Should there be any comments, any questions, any insights? So we open the floor.
Good morning, everyone. Annetta Jackson, Legal Counsel, AG's Office, Antigua and Barbuda. I really appreciate the richness of the discussion this morning, and I am still touched by the contribution of Ms. Lampkin at the start of the session. Counsel Ali, you noted that we could benefit from a Caribbean gender observatory. I note that the Spotlight Initiative, UNFPA, and International Planned Parenthood, they were kind of putting together a Caribbean Gender Observatory. I don't recall the timeline on that, but that is in progress. I think there's representatives in the room, so we can try to chase on that. Specific question to you, though, with regards to the legal reforms and consultations that are happening in Trinidad and Tobago. How much of this is being done collaboratively with the ministries responsible for social services and the like? I know oftentimes when we have issues dealing with justice, we kind of try to centralize them at the AG's office, but these issues are social issues and they're people issues. So how much of this is being led collaboratively across those two ministries?
Thank you for your question. I think the national consultation was definitely, the vision behind it was to definitely collaborate with all persons from all agencies, such as healthcare, education, counselors within the education system, persons who would be first points of contact in a lot of these cases. And so, to answer your question, yes, a lot of the key persons would have also been engaged in these discussions. So there was a lot of different ideas, and I think it will be beneficial in the long run when we see the outcome of the discussions.
Okay, maybe I'll ask my question.
Okay. Yes. Carol and then the Honorable AG, please.
Thank you. I have an operational question. I want to know, I don't know if Ms. Lampkin is still on, how did you get in touch with these lawyers? Through what pathway did this help come?
Do we still have Ms. Lampkin on the call? Yes. Ms. Lampkin, if you're there, there's this question being directed to you in terms of how did you make contact, or how did they meet you, for example, these lawyers that formed your team? Lampkin, can you hear us?
I believe your microphone is
I
muted.
think it's
if you
muted.
could unmute the microphone.
If there's anyone at the side that can unmute the microphone, is that possible?
I think she may have stepped away.
Certainly. Douglas, could you or possibly Roberto respond to that query?
Yes, I think Roberta is the better person to respond to that query.
Indeed, sir.
Thank you. Is she there? Is she on the line? Okay, I think she's there. Tot, are you there? Can you answer the question? What should I do, Heather? Okay, yeah, okay. On the question, there is several organizations in Trinidad and Tobago focused on domestic violence, and one of them is the Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And so when Samantha's murder was, when we became aware of Samantha's murder, we went to see the family to sort of find out what had happened and how we could support. And in that moment, we met Ms. Lampkin and her family. And over time, I think consistent engagement with her and with her family, trust being built. But I don't even think that she needed trust, because at that moment she was so, of course, aggrieved, so outraged that her story, she was really very much in the moment of telling her story and getting that justice. And so the trust was built over time between the coalition. Oh, there she is.
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Lampkin.
Yeah, we was having some problem on this side. But anyway, as what Roberta will say, she came to look for me. And she was there with me and always encouraging me. But I didn't really trust anybody at the time, because I realized that we wasn't getting justice. And I spoke to her, and she's begging me, Miss Lampkin, we will be here, we will support you, you have to trust me. I even questioned her husband. I said, do I have a good lawyer? And she said, yes, you have a good lawyer. That's my husband. I said, well, okay, I trust you. And then I move on with her. But she did reach out to me, and when I had nobody, she reached out, and I built my confidence in her from there on.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lampkin. I saw the Honorable Attorney General. Yes, sir, please.
Thank you very much. There's a saying that exceptional cases make exceptional law. And this is a classic example. And when I listen to Ms. Lampkin's horror story, the world has a way of correcting egregious wrongs, and what Ms. Lampkin suffered was a series of most egregious violations. And then the circumstances brought together, perhaps the best legal forensic mind in the Caribbean, my brother, Douglas Mendez, and the forces aligned together to produce what we have now as an outstanding judgment. The tragedy is, however, is that in the rest of the Caribbean, how many Douglas Mendez do you have? How many Roberta do you have? And then Douglas himself mentions not all of our constitutions use the same language that is present in the Trinidad Constitution. Those of us who studied constitutional history would know that Trinidad departed from the Westminster Model Constitution and adopted the Canadian Charter of Rights. And they have protection of the law as a substantive fundamental right. And the skillful lawyer that Mendez is, he capitalized on that. And of course, he was able to massage the right to life provision to bring it in keeping with that protection of the law. But many of our constitutions are not so constructed. And that is why Justice Mohammed and, of course, Mendez would have persuaded him to use the types and canons of construction that would conduce to the outcome that we finally have. We have to get our judges to that place. Because Guyana, for example, I don't ever leave Guyana without my constitution. I looked at our constitution. We have a marginal note, and this is present in almost all the, as I said, Trinidad is the exception. We have a protection of law provision, but it does two things only. It presumes a person charged with a criminal offense to be innocent, and it guarantees to that person a fair trial. And secondly, it affords a fair trial in civil proceedings, none of which technically applies to this case. But the Trinidad Constitution is different. So a precedent has been set, and hopefully judicial activism, because the way Mendez formulated it, the state has a basic obligation. And you begin from that premise, and then you use, for example, the John Doe type of reasoning, that it could never be the intention of the framers of the Constitution to give you this basic guarantee, but then because of deficient language, deny you of an efficacious remedy. But it requires the judiciary to buy in to this type of jurisprudence. And in our advocacy going forward, we have to get our judiciary on board to put this type of interpretation on it. And I want to commend Douglas Mendez for doing this. First of all, obviously it's pro bono, and there's been a lot of work, and it's groundbreaking. He has set a precedent for all jurisdictions to emulate. I don't know whether the matter is subject of an appeal. This is a High Court decision. So was it appealed? It wasn't appealed, so.
It was, an appeal was lodged but then withdrawn.
Okay, well, good sense prevailed. So we have to develop on what Justice Mohammed did there. So congratulations, and thank you very much, Miss, for leading what will be a revolution in the Caribbean. Thank you.
Thank you. I see hands. I do want to note two things very quickly. It is very much the intention of the CARICOM high-level representative for Law and Justice, Mr. Godfrey Smith of Belize, to convene a conversation with Chief Justices and heads of governments next year to have a fulsome discussion among reforms. And as has been stated yesterday, have this be one of those elements. Speaking with him just this week, he looks very much at what comes out of this conversation to facilitate that. But I also want to harken back to what the Honorable Attorney General said. Judicial activism is a key part of this story. If you read the judgment, you'll see where I'm not a judge, I'm not a lawyer, but I saw where certainly it was on a minority decision of the Canadian Supreme Court that much of the argument was accepted by Justice Mohammed in terms of how Justice Arbour in the Canadian Supreme Court accepted, again in minority, the right to life being proactive. And I think for a judge to have the bravery to do that, right, and the common sense, the good sense, the reasonableness, I think you're exactly right, Honorable AG. Please.
Good morning, and I just wanted to join in really thanking Ms. Lampkin for sharing her story, and a story that is so powerful from which I know many of us in the room continue to learn. Thank you for being here and thank you for being brave. I wanted to just quickly pick up on the point of how we can work regionally. There's a way in which I think we have done so much work over many decades in the Caribbean, but I'm not sure we are really documenting and doing dovetailing and joint up kind of work. And when our colleague from the Attorney General Office in Trinidad and Tobago made the point about a CARICOM observatory, gender observatory, I thought that, I'm not sure, maybe CARICOM is in the room, there needs to be more activism from CARICOM around these issues, because CARICOM did lead us alongside attorneys general and persons from the women's movement and gender bureau across the region in creating domestic violence model legislation. So there's some things that work well regionally that we have to build on. Last year, I'm from the Institute for Gender and Development Studies, and we worked alongside CDB and UN Women to host a symposium around the 16 days of activism. And one of the things we committed to is a regional repository for all things sexual and gender-based violence. Because I think in some ways we do not know what each other is doing, and we do not know sufficiently. So much of what I heard today builds really usefully on what has been done. And I do think the idea of lessons learned and good practices could better serve us if we find a way of housing and stock taking that regionally. So I do hope whatever declaration comes from this meeting takes a perspective or a commitment to us working from our various entity. Activism was used here today, and the personal activism of Mrs. Lampkin is absolutely inspiring, but the activism by the lawyers, the judicial activism to which you spoke, the activism of Caribbean women's movement, the state activism and community activism. So I'm really calling on us to see how we can find a way of working, building on what has been done and learning from terrible lessons as we've heard. So thank you for the point around doing this work regionally.
Thank you so much. Please, the floor remains open.
Good morning. I'm Shalon Daniels from Guyana. Picking up from what my AG would have said, I think this case is a good case. It's an interesting case. And as a law enforcement officer, I think what can be done in properly utilizing this case across the Caribbean is to use it as a case study, especially when dealing with our law enforcement officers. They should be reminded as it relates to the consequences. There is a lot to take away from the case. I would have just Googled it. I observed what the decisions were, the reasons for those decisions. And if we use it as a case study, it can prevent most of the things. Once again, I would like to say kudos to Ms. Lampkin. Somebody had to do it. Today, what we have is a precedent set, and things for justices, as well as the judges and the magistrates, can work on. That is my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shalon. Oh, please, there's a hand. Oh, two. Yes, Sherwin, please. And
Thank you. And Mrs. Lampkin, thank you so much for sharing your testimony with us. Just two quick points. Yes, CARICOM is in the room, and I'll get back to that point. But I just want to touch on an issue that was raised earlier with regard to sensitization of the police and that sector with the requirement for how do you treat cases like this. But I think that breaches another issue because in 2023, in conjunction with the Spotlight Initiative, we did a complete analysis of the, and I have to read it because it's long, well, not that long, analytical assessment of gender mainstreaming in regional security frameworks and approaches and in national development plans to assess the extent and alignment and harmonization of national policy strategies to regional, continental, and international instruments on gender. And what that delivered was a guideline to integrate gender perspectives, gender-based violence minimum standards, and practical solutions for responding to violence against women and girls and family violence, which is really directed at the response that the police themselves has to take. Subsequent to that, there was a community of practice formed, and it meets regularly, and there's representation from most member states at most times. So it is a little bit challenging to hear that we still have this problem with sensitization. So maybe there's a link or a loop that is being missed. And I would want us to think about how we can maybe bridge that gap so that these strategies and instruments actually gets to where it is supposed to work, into the hands of the people that actually need to use them, and what strategies or compromise we need to do. With respect to CARICOM in the room and the Gender Observatory, we did begin to look at a gender strategy, a revised gender strategy recently, but unfortunately we lost our gender desk right after that. But we are in the process of hiring one, so the interview process has already gone on, so hopefully we can see more momentum in that in the coming future. But separate and apart from that, because this is so interlinked, this particular issue, because when we worked on the Spotlight Initiative, it really was a collaborative effort at the Secretariat at my desk, which is Crime and Security, Youth, Gender, Human Resource Development, and Education. So we've been filling the gaps until we get that gender person around, but just to let you know that is coming, and perhaps there's some thought that can be put to how do we really begin to effectively place these instruments that have been developed, perhaps get them integrated into national plans, national development plans, so that they can actually begin to bear fruit. Thanks.
I know there was one other hand up.
Can you hear me now? Good morning. Sharice Allen from the Department of Social Services in Montserrat. I join my colleagues in commending Ms. Lampkin on her bravery in helping us to understand, obviously, the situation with regards to DV from a victim/survivor perspective. But I suppose as someone within the safeguarding field, I wanted to understand, was there any involvement from the equivalent of the Department of Social Services?
Ms. Lampkin, did you hear the question? Would you like them to repeat it? So sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, repeat the question for me, please. Thank you.
Was there any involvement from the Department of Social Services?
No, there was none. The only involvement I get from the social service is after my daughter passed the day. The next day they came and tell me, well, Ms. Lampkin, as the man kill your daughter, I don't think you'll want the child, so we come to take the child. My response was not nice. I wanted to kill somebody in my yard. I said, don't ever come and tell me no stupidness about my grandchild. Son, this is my son, my grandson, and I'm keeping him. So they advised me to go to the court and file for custody for him. And that's what I did. That is the only involvement I ever got from social service.
My apologies. I'm sorry to hear about that. And I suppose I have another question. I commend you in terms of your efforts exerted towards supporting his holistic development. But what does recovery look like for him? Now he's aging. Obviously, he's gaining more of a sense of what would have transpired. How are you coping with that? Are you accessing counseling as well?
I'm coping with it very well because this young man is a smart and sensible young man. Actually, sometimes when I'm down, he cheer me up. He's always there for me. He's always telling me one day we will see mommy again. Don't worry, Granny. Mommy won't want us to be sad and things like. He's always encouraging me because we got a lot of therapy, and he's a strong young man, outstanding person. Straightest student, outstanding person. That little boy is my strong tower. Yeah.
May I say, Ms. Lampkin, again, your whole family is a model.
Thank you.
I want to, and there may be other questions, but I also want to pick up on a very important question that bridges much of what we discussed over the last day and a half, and that is around this idea of possible threshold effects. This case is clearly one of the more egregious cases of public misconduct, grossful negligence, and there's a question in my mind whether the uniqueness of the case works against us making these kinds of remedial steps more normative. In other words, do you have to have an instance where a victim goes for reprieve, goes for some respite 3-4 times, and is neglected in those instances for us then to trigger this level of alarm? Is because, to be very honest, even in Justice Mohammed's judgment, he kept referencing just a blatant neglect. And I'm wondering, what does that portend for a victim? Do they need to have to make multiple reports? Or is there a way that we can, whether it's through risk assessment, some other more preventative or proactive measure, reduce the need for us to get to this point? So I'll allow Douglas, and I see Anika, but I'll allow Douglas.
Yeah, thanks very much. The jurisprudence that had been developed in relation to the right to life required the complainant to establish that there was a real and imminent threat to life in order to trigger a response from the police and therefore to fix the police with liability for inaction. But of course that has to be because the complaint is that my right to life has been affected. So naturally, if you're going to hold the state responsible for someone's loss of life, then you're going to have to establish that there's a real and imminent threat to life. So that the threshold test is high, and the courts say that it is a high threshold test. But it doesn't mean that you have to have multiple complaints. As a matter of fact, that was one of the arguments that the state put forward, that compared to other similar cases where you had multiple complaints over long periods of time, this was one in which there were 3 or 4 complaints, as it were. But Justice Mohammed wasn't persuaded by that distinction. He found that there was still a real and imminent threat to life. But I have to make this important point, and the AG of Guyana also alluded to this, that this case was also about the protection of the law. And we will have to work out over time whether the obligation to protect under the protection of the law is triggered by such a high threshold test. Because theoretically, it can be breached even if life isn't taken. When you go to the police and you're reporting the commission of a crime, the police are under a duty to investigate. And if they do not, and they have no good reason for failing to investigate, then your right to the protection of the law is infringed. And certainly that would have to be worked out over time, so that the message of this case going into the protection of the law as well, and finding liability on the basis of the breach of the right to protection of the law, is that there is already a constitutional obligation to put into place all of the mechanisms that we have been discussing over the last 2 days in order to ensure that there's protection of the law, which would include, of course, putting into place the necessary remedies, being able to go to court for protection orders and so on. That is now recognized, or at least Justice Mohammed has started the conversation about there being a constitutional obligation to put all of these things in place that we have been discussing here.
And again, I reference the Needham's Point Declaration. I think for those of us who will be next month in Trinidad and Tobago at the CCJ's biennial conference, these are the kinds of cases and discussions that we need to foment and promote. Adika, please.
Good morning, everyone. So I have a comment and a question. In relation to the training of police officers, and in particular, the need for gender sensitization training, I would say that training alone is not enough. Police officers have been given, all over the region, have been a part of hundreds of gender sensitization training, and it has not worked. I have been a part of some of those trainings. So for training to work, it has to be institutionalized, it has to be mandatory, and it has to be linked to what was discussed earlier about sanctions for non-performance. So for example, I don't know of any of the jurisdictions except for Jamaica that has an independent body, and maybe Trinidad, that has an independent body that is focused specifically on dealing with complaints in relation to police officers. And one of the things that has worked in Jamaica, especially in relation to extrajudicial actions by the police, is the establishment of INDECOM, an independent body with enforcement powers. So if we are really serious about tackling the issue of the police, training is not enough. It has to be linked to sanctions for non-performance, and that training has to be institutionalized. The second thing, which is my question, and the question is for Mr. Mendez. I read the judgment, and the thing that stood out to me was the right to equality would have been pleaded, but it wasn't argued. And so I was interested in knowing why it wasn't argued, especially because it seems that there would have been a case as it relates to the right to equality of women under the law, and maybe even freedom from discrimination on the basis of sex. So I'm curious as to know why it wasn't argued.
I would have to go back through my thought processes a few years ago to tell you that. But it was, as far as I recall, we didn't have the necessary evidence to indicate that this was in fact due to the fact that Samantha was a woman, and that is why the police didn't act, or due to the fact that Samantha was a woman, why the magistrate did not treat with the application in the way she ought to have. It just did not appear that we could have made that argument on the basis of the evidence that we did have. But in any event, it was not necessary because the law was so clear in relation to the other rights that we eventually relied on.
So colleagues, I'm mindful of our time and that we also have, I think, the rest of the day to have these very important conversations. I see one more hand, and in deference, I will allow that point to be made, please.
Yes, good morning. I am Sandra Bowden, Deputy Commissioner of Police for the Belize Police Department. I have a comment and a suggestion. Our most famous case in Belize is the 1963 Noram Param case, where she was convicted of murder of her husband when she was in a domestic violence situation. She was eventually hung for that murder. But that murder conviction was overturned for her posthumously in 2022. And it sparked a number of questions based on her conviction for people who are in domestic violence cases. I say that because as police officers, we are no strangers to domestic violence, whether we are on the receiving end or whether we are on the giving end or whether we are there to provide service for others. A good friend of mine, Arilie Young, she was murdered in 2021 by her domestic partner. And it left a huge void because her 17-year-old daughter was also murdered with her. We have police officers committing suicide because they are domestic abusers. And this subject is very dear to my heart because as police officers, we see this every day, like I said, whether we are on the receiving end or whether we are on the giving end. And I think that as members of our society, there's so much more that we can do for our police officers. We often criticize them for not doing what they're supposed to do. And this is true, but we don't look at the other end to say that police officers are human beings too. And I think that we have to do so much more for our officers in terms of training, not just giving them what they need, but we also have to deal with other people's situation, but also in dealing with their own situations. We have to train supervisors to recognize the signs of domestic violence in their subordinates. We have to offer mandatory counseling for our officers when we see those signs. And we also have to teach our officers to deal with their own anger management issues. And I think these are issues that are often overlooked, and it is something that we need to address and address urgently.
Deputy Commissioner, I want to thank you for speaking on behalf of your brothers and sisters. I think those points resonate. They will certainly be, I know we will be speaking later today more about elements that are, I think, reflective of these points. I want to say two things. There are some very wonderful police officers who have been in sessions with us over the previous years where these issues have been discussed about how do we protect the police, given the spaces that they have to operate in on a daily basis, given the stresses that they unfortunately take home with them. And I think that certainly later this afternoon, we're going to be talking about in very concrete ways what we know to be a case. Officer-perpetrated domestic violence is one of the highest rates of domestic violence. How do we address those issues in proactive and effective ways? I want to give an opportunity, and forgive me, Honorable Attorney General Marshall, I know you're doing multiple things, but sir, you are the raison d'etre for us being here. Is there anything that you would want to close with from your perspective? I just want to give you that opportunity. Yes,
Thank you. Just a few reflections, if I can be so bold as to call them reflections. First of all, I had a discussion with former AG Reggie Armour in the immediate aftermath of the Tot Lampkin decision. And I agreed with him that if I were AG for Trinidad, I wouldn't appeal either. It simply didn't make any sense. And it would have sent the wrong signal. So if that case were decided in Barbados, I would have taken the same stance. But that notwithstanding, Douglas, I think you would agree that there are some issues that arise out of the decision which would benefit from further judicial interpretation and clarification. So while I support the decision 100%, as Attorney General, I now have to ask myself, what happens if my neighbor is threatened by someone down the street and reports it to the police, and there's a constant back and forth, and eventually it ends up in another homicide? There's no domestic violence relationship, but still, are we, and I remember from the decision that the floodgates argument was advanced, and as an AG, I have to be mindful of what that means in terms of the administration of justice, in terms of the the use of government resources, and things of that sort. So one concern for me is, are we opening up the floodgates to litigation wherever a citizen feels that the structures of the state have not sufficiently advanced their own cause? In the regrettable instance of the victim here, there was a homicide. It might be an assault. It might be a failure to provide with the best medical attention. It may be a failure to fix a road, which then results in a traffic accident, which then results in another death. So this decision, as important as it is, for the purposes of a jurisprudential analysis, it does require another level of judicial analysis, probably on appeal, to try to ferret out exactly what Justice Mohammed meant. We understand when he says it was an exceptional case. It absolutely was. But is it that every other instance where there's a failure from the state, that there will be issues? And I'd like you to whisper to me what level of damages was awarded. I wouldn't want you to announce it here. But I'd also be interested in understanding how a judge will quantify the level of damages in this case. I mean, if it was a personal injury matter, you remember that they said that the value of a life was $5,000. Okay, that's nothing to do with the other damages, but they had to set a figure. So those are the kinds of things that I think we need to consider. But I really appreciate the opportunity, and Douglas, I'm so grateful that you know we wanted you in Barbados a few months back, but I'm glad that you're here to share your personal perspectives, being a champion in this particular instance. And the only other thing I'd mention is AG Guyana talked about the right of protection of the law, but in many of our constitutions we have that preambular statement. And in that preambular statement, there is actually a reference to the protection of the law. And you remember that the case of Nervé in the Caribbean Court of Justice said that even though that statement in all of our constitutions is like a preamble, that it is actually justiciable. So even though my constitution will fear the same criticism as Guyana in dealing with the right to the protection of the law in the context of the judicial system, a litigant could rely on the statement in the preamble, section 11, which talks about the protection of the law as being one of those overarching rights that are available. But thank you very much for allowing me to say these few words.
Honorable Attorney General, thank you. And colleagues, we will close this session in an open-ended manner. I hope the conversations begin and continue during lunch or during the break and thereafter. Just allow us once again to thank Ms. Lampkin for taking the time to join us today. Ms. Lampkin, we really sincerely want to thank you for your time, your efforts, your bravery. And of course, I want to thank our panel for doing an excellent job of opining and sharing their thoughts on the case and the aftermath. So thank you all.
And you are so humble, Jason, because we thank you for expertly moderating the panel and keeping the discussion moving forward. And I will echo his sentiments and strongly encourage all of us to keep the conversation going. Lucky for us, we have a coffee break that can facilitate that. So we're going to let you all get up now, stretch your legs. I know there's much to unpack, not only physically, but emotionally. Let us enjoy our coffee break and our refreshments outside, and we will reconvene at approximately 10:55. If we can find ourselves back in the room at 10:55, which is 15 minutes from now, and as you know, you can always bring your coffee and refreshments in with you. We will be resuming with our next session, where we'll be focusing on addressing perpetrators of domestic violence. So 15 minutes, and we'll see you right back here inside the room.